work out a couple of logistical details for the council meeting, and I'll call it to order now. First of all, I want to acknowledge a tremendous group of staff that have done yeoman's work on the celebration of our 125th anniversary. On the weekend, we had our signature event, the Kaleidoscope Festival at Town Centre Park, and a variety of other events and a variety of other celebrations, including shooting for 125 block parties during the course of the year. I want to thank the cast force, which is the team that has put together these celebrations, as well as all of the staff and all of the volunteers and community members that really are quite passionate about the celebration of our 125th anniversary. This afternoon we recognized an important milestone in that 125 years ago today the city was incorporated, or not as a city at the time, as a district. The district of Coquitlam was incorporated on this day in 1891. So good evening as we get ready to acknowledge that. 125 years, of course, it's incredibly impressive. Incorporated in 1891, Coquitlam is definitely one of the province's more established municipalities. When Coquitlam was incorporated on July 25th, 1891, it was a small agricultural community and a destination of choice for many settlers attracted by the opportunities and lifestyle of this little-known town on the banks of the Fraser River. Fast forward 125 years, and the city has grown and evolved in ways that would make it unrecognizable to those early settlers, yet they would likely still feel at home. Coquitlam is known for its warm friendliness and welcomes people from many countries who choose to live here and visit because they love Coquitlam's energy, amenities, proximity to nature. Now home to just over 144,000 residents, Coquitlam has grown into a vibrant and rapidly growing community with a range of housing options, business and employment opportunities, modern transportation systems, excellent educational institutions, abundant green space, arts and culture offerings, shopping and community amenities, and an open, accessible government. Coquitlam is British Columbia's 5th largest municipality. We're also the 3rd fastest growing municipality in Metro Vancouver. We're also home to over 6,200 businesses that contribute to local employment and the city's prosperity. Coquitlam's population is diverse. We celebrate these diversities in our festivals and community events over the course of this year, and we thank everyone for joining in our anniversary celebrations. I just wanted to read out very quickly the minutes of the first council meeting. It was actually held in Kelly Hall. Coincidentally, the reeve of the day, the mayor of the day, was R.B. Kelly, so we assume it's in his living room. The assembled council, this is about a month after incorporation, undertook only one business item in the meeting. It was presumably at the time they felt it was the most important thing you could do was hire a good city clerk. So that is the only business item. They chose to set the salary for the city clerk for the balance of the year, so the salary was set at $50 for 4.5 months of work, and so that's about right. Yeah.
He didn't even have to run the election. He was appointed after.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So, and then they moved adjournment and undoubtedly went out to smoke a pipe or something on the back deck. And that was Reeve R.B. Kelly, the first mayor of Coquitlam 125 years ago. But to acknowledge that incredible date and this wonderful occasion, I would invite Councillor O'Neill if he has anything to say or otherwise.
I think I've got a song. I think we should be singing happy birthday to everybody. So please, let's all stand up.
I said if you had anything to say.
Let's sing happy birthday to Coquitlam. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Coquitlam. Happy birthday to you.
That song is going to be a big hit someday. All right. So it is a big day. This is also our final council meeting before the summer break. We traditionally take August and do not have council meetings during the month of August so that council members can get away with their families and enjoy the summer. We'll be back in September, but we'll start this evening's meeting right now, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 1 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, July 18th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is minutes of the Coquitlam 125 Anniversary Steering Task Force meeting of Tuesday, July 12th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is the first item from this evening's public hearing. It pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4685 and 17, pertains to 1733 Brunette Avenue. Staff recommendations that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to see Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4685.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Yeah, I know. You going to do this again?
I'm going to excuse myself from this part of the meeting because I have a shared financial interest in this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge absents himself from consideration of this item. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 4 is 1373 Glenbrook Street and zoning amendment bylaw number 4689. Staff recommendation is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to save Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4689.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Towner, and seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
I will just go collect Councillor Hodge.
Thank you.
Next item, item 5, is bylaw for final adoption. This is the Fire Prevention and Life Safety Amendment bylaw number 4660. Staff recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to Fire Prevention and Life Safety Amendment bylaw number 4660, Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment, Fire Safety bylaw number 4692, and Municipal Ticket Information Amendment, Fire Safety bylaw number 4693.
Moved by Councillor Towner, second by Councillor O'Neill.
You are overriding.
I am overriding. Okay, it's a serious bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously, and with our thanks to the fire department and the fire chief for always looking after the fire safety of our community.
Next item, item 6, pertains to single-family development frontage works and Cash-in-Lieu program. Staff recommendations that council endorse staff pursuing options for requiring off-site frontage works related to single-family dwelling building permits with the approval and principle of option 3 moving forward. Endorse staff pursuing the potential for the city to accept cash-in-lieu of frontage works when deemed appropriate by staff and agreed to by the applicant. And 3, direct staff to proceed with the development phase of both the above recommended practices with a report to an upcoming council meeting outlining details of a proposed action plan and an outline of associated bylaw amendments. We have introductory comments by the city manager and a presentation by the supervisor of development servicing.
Recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson. Second, sorry, I didn't catch the one over there. Okay, I'll go with Towner. Seconded by Councillor Towner.
Over the last couple of years, Coquitlam has been experiencing a very high growth rate, and both in terms of greenfield sites, primarily in the north, but also infill sites in the older part of Coquitlam. When a greenfield site comes forward, all the services are put in a holistic manner in the entire street with curb and gutter, street lights, all the various amenities that a new community would expect are installed as part of the subdivision, and that happens in new subdivisions. But in an older community, and as you know, we are experiencing high growth rates there as well, with two-lot splits, with infill housing, and a variety of other issues. And when that happens, the frontage abutting the project in question needs to be and is upgraded by the applicant, the development in question, but the entire street is not, which leads to what we call discontinuous improvements. So you have very full improvements for a very small section, and you have gaps and missing sections. It's our belief that we can come up with a better system of implementing those kind of improvements in the older parts of Coquitlam. And so we asked Jason Cardoni, who works in our development servicing area, to do a review of this. He has completed that review, and that's how this report came to be. Jason has a short presentation. I would introduce Jason at this time.
My questions at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Stevlin. Mr. Cardoni.
Thank you, Pete. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jason Cardoni. I'm with the Development Servicing Section of Planning and Development, and here tonight to just provide a brief presentation on the issue as Pete's just outlined with regards to frontage works and services with specific review at single-family building permits and the element that Pete alluded to as well too, cash-in-lieu and services, works and services as an option for looking at some of the discontinued works that we see on some of our frontages that are being developed. This presentation will provide an overview, current City of Coquitlam regulations, current issues we're currently experiencing in some of our high growth, older established neighborhoods, specifically with the emphasis on single family building permits that we're seeing quite a bit of growth within, and the issue of disconnected frontage works and services. We'll also touch on some of the items that we're going to need to consider and address moving forward, and next steps. Just to briefly explain and not get into a ton of detail on current City of Coquitlam requirements, essentially there's two bylaws that are in effect that regulate frontage works and services. Specifically, our subdivision development servicing bylaw sets the framework for roads, completion of curbs, sidewalks, boulevards, outside utility locations, street lighting. So what you would typically see as a subdivision or development comes forward. The second tool is actually our building bylaw that actually outlines requirements for developments that would be that where servicing works would apply to as part of a building permit application. And so those would include commercial building permits, multifamily building permits, duplexes. However, currently right now, the one exemption is for single family, and that's the area where we're focusing our review on at this time. So just as an example of a typical kind of frontage that you may see as a subdivision or development is completed, concrete curb and gutter works, boulevard, street trees, street lighting. These are all elements that we would expect be completed by the developer with a subdivision or development, and to develop the type of streetscape that we're ultimately looking for within our city. Safe pedestrian movement zones, organized parking, safe travel lanes, aesthetic finishing, landscape grass, those types of elements. So current issues we're currently dealing with right now, and I've got some examples of these situations. Exemption of single-family building permits, the various gaps that are being created, and I'll speak to that in a minute. Some of the inequities we're seeing with developments occurring right beside another development, some properties finishing works and services, others not. and the issue around where works and services are required, the disconnection. It may be some time till those pieces all fill in, and are there options that we can maybe look at to better address those situations? So this here is a photo example of what is becoming a somewhat typical situation in a number of our established neighborhoods. Fairly large houses being redeveloped. This is a situation where there's approximately 4 in a row. You can see the streetscape that is being completed there, which is essentially asphalt frontages. There's various gaps and inconsistent standards. And the public realm isn't really being addressed with sidewalk or pedestrian type safety elements. This is another example here where we've got in our Housing Choices neighborhood, which is actually a neighborhood designation that's trying to promote density, alternative design considerations, coach houses, these types of elements. And this is a situation here where we've got a 2-lot subdivision that's occurred within that area. However, directly beside it, a larger single-family house that's being built. Curbs, sidewalks, street lighting has been developed on the one frontage, whereas the other frontage hasn't completed any of those works and services. And then the third element that I spoke to is the issue of disconnected. It may be premature, disconnected. It's a situation where the developer is fulfilling their bylaw requirements and addressing their frontage improvements, but the timing with adjacent developments may not be in sync. So are there other options that we can look at in addressing that type of situation? So key items to consider moving forward. Obviously, we've got statutory legal authority that would be part of our review. Our legal department would be involved. We've obviously regulated under the Local Government Act and our bylaws, so those would be elements we would need to develop further. Program scope, decision-making criteria. When do you require works and services? When do you look at other options to address? Documentation, tracking, having clear systems of where we know the works and services have either been built, completed, serviced, what's coming on stream. So looking at enhancements to our current tracking systems. If we do get into a situation where funds or cash is being collected in lieu of construction, what type of programs might be available or in place to utilize those funds. That would be a key element, is that once cash is collected, there's an expectation of performance, and that would go on the city side as well too. So that's a significant issue we would need to address, along with the associated financial matters. And ultimately, at the end of the day, customer service is a key consideration. Ensuring everyone knows the requirements, knows their obligations, and that's something we would have to then work on in developing as well too. So our initial review that we've conducted in looking at this essentially have focused us to 3 options within our recommendations, where we're looking at option 3 as a recommended approach to evaluate further. But the first one obviously is our existing approach, which is obviously leaving us some challenges as our neighborhoods are developing. Right to a spectrum where we apply full requirements across the board. That again can have challenges depending on the type of development and those requirements are how they apply to the applications that are being submitted. And then the third option is an area-based approach where we actually would develop criteria. So we would be looking at focusing our efforts, at least in the initial stages, high-density areas, our housing choices neighborhoods, areas with redevelopment volumes, areas where there's other development options exist for these applications as well, whether it be subdivision or some sort of a 2 or 3 unit type of a development as opposed to just a single family. Looking at a criteria to address new single-family development, we need to be clear that this, on the scope of criteria and making sure we're truly being reasonable with the requirements and addressing the new single-family developments. Look at options for other older established neighborhoods. There's lots of areas where maybe works and services aren't fully up to 100% standard, but the neighborhoods are established. There's very little opportunity or potential for turnover or change. and have criteria that would allow us to look at those existing conditions. And lastly, evaluate the cash-in-lieu option. This is, again, an option that may be able to assist us in looking at the disconnected works and services. So next steps, as per the report that's in front of council today, staff are looking for council to endorse the concept of us looking at options requiring off-site works and services for single-family building permits with approval in principle of option 3. Endorse staff pursuing the potential to accept cash in lieu for frontage works and services. There's more work to be done there, but that's an option we'll be evaluating. And direct staff to proceed with the development phase, and that's where we would then go back and initiate our detailed review, legal input, building review input, engineering department, and develop an action plan with potentially bylaw amendments that may come forward to council. That's my presentation for tonight, and look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garoni. Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you. Good report. I moved it, and there will be a future report coming back to council on this. So right now, I guess more this is, would be council feedback to you on what I'd like to see coming back in that. On the cash-in-lieu portion of this, I would like to see that the cash-in-lieu be used in the different cities, I think Burnaby model, where it's collected for up to 7 years if it's not used within the 7 years. So my concern in here when you talk about the cash-in-lieu is you're talking about the frontage works premature, but in your report it said this would not be a mandatory requirement or an option for both parties. But if it's not mandatory, we're really not going to be dealing and correcting the problems of frontage works in single-family areas, because if it's not mandatory, people say, well, I don't want to pay that extra cost, and I won't move on to it. So I think if we go to a cash-in-lieu situation, and we have in specific areas where we see high growth or rapid changeover, it should be mandatory by the city for a cash-in-lieu. And I think the cash-in-lieu should be up to 7 years. If it's not used in that area in 7 years, then it's returned. The problem we had before with our bylaws, there was no end date to have that money returned. I think this gets an end date on it. But I do think that, and I agree the areas to what you're going to look at, but I do think that we as a city, right now we're missing a lot of areas where we're seeing some rapid redevelopment of single-family areas right close to each other along streets that we're not getting the frontage improvements put in by those newer, expensive single-family homes. And the neighborhoods in those areas aren't getting the improvements that should go with those developments as they move forward. So I think I agree with the areas-based approach. I think some of the stuff in there is good, but I think we also have to be very mindful of the areas that are starting to see and be monitoring that situation as from staff.
Just a comment of clarification. The cash-in-lieu is optional, but the improvements are not optional. The only way that they don't have to participate in the cash-in-lieu process, and the only way not to participate was actually to build the works. So it's not, okay, do you want to just give us $5,000 or $6,000 and you don't have to do that? No, they have to build the works, but it might be better for them to optionally go to a cash-in-lieu system, and then we would manage the improvements over time as one holistic project. That's a very important nuance that may not be totally apparent in the report.
Not very apparent within the...
Well, it's not so much an option, but it's an alternative that must be agreed to by both parties.
Yes,
that would be better wording, because that doesn't say in that report. It doesn't come clear that way. The one point I would like to say is that it should be taken by all applications up to 7 years and hold it. And what about the latecomers? I mentioned this before, and you've got it in here that I meant it when we had this in committee about having latecomer agreements, that we do have that in our legislation now to use if we're going to be doing future works wherever, to if there's people in those streets that haven't developed, that we can put down latecomers so when they do develop, that we get that money back from them. Is that being part of your, I know it's in here, is that the analysis you're going to be?
That would be part of our review. Now, the term latecomers is typically a term used for developers that are, when they are developing and they may be installing some infrastructure that they can introduce what under the legislation as a latecomers. We would be doing our analysis of other municipalities. There's local improvement type programs. There are other initiatives that can be developed that even our own capital works in looking at cost recovery mechanisms where the city may be technically front-ending some of that work and in an area that we know is going to redevelop. So that's would be part of the evaluation as well.
Good. I just want to make sure that because I raised that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid? No, that's right. Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to get something quite clear. So this would apply to homes that, single-family homes that are being built on currently unoccupied single lots, or a single-family home that's being built in, on the place of a demolished house. Would it? And that so far is clear.
Yeah,
What about a single-family house? And I want to make sure this is clear, that undergoes really major and extensive renovations. Is there any thought to have these charges applied there as well?
That's part of the defining the criteria, and that would be definitely part of our reporting back.
Yeah, that'd be an important thing to find out. Because I wouldn't want to. I'm more leaning towards it has to be brand new, but I know that I'll be interested to see what you come up with on that one. And I guess I just want to get this on the record. The number one reason that I would support this is where you would see in one of the, where I'd support, by the way, the overall program, is the situation in which there are two large lots in a housing choices area, and where the developer would say, you know, if I just build a very big house here to replace the small house that's there, I'm not going to have to do any of these improvements. But if I were to want to build 4 little cottages on here, as I'm allowed to do under housing choices, and as council is encouraging people to do to infill housing and to help housing affordability, the developer would have to build those sidewalks and improvements, everything like that. And might be dissuaded from doing so because of the extra cost, and could get more bang for his developer dollar by building one big house or something like that. And that's really not the way to increase housing affordability. Now, this will add a little bit to the cost of a house, but I think the positives quite a bit outweigh the negatives in something like this, and it'll add so much more to the neighborhood when we get all these anomalies fixed. I'm not sure if it's an anomaly. I mean, it's something that we knew existed and has existed for a long time, and it's just creating, with this rapid rate of redevelopment right now, creating quite a patchwork, hodgepodge of different looks across the front of the streets. I like using the word hodgepodge. Thank you very much.
Trying to characterize something funny about O'Neill, but O'Neill down. Councillor Hodge.
I'm hoping that the minutes will reflect his comments. But anyway, my question was, I noticed in here where it says the program scope and application criteria, and then it mentions, as part of this, staff will need to consider whether the current bylaw construction value threshold trigger of $150,000 is applicable. So am I reading that we actually have a trigger point of $150,000 currently?
Currently, for other types of developments, single family is completely exempt. Okay. For other types of developments where there also is, there's additional criteria there around increasing of floor area. So, but $150,000 is a construction threshold that would apply. So for a commercial development coming in, if they were adding on and it was in excess, they could then be evaluated and subject to perimeter offsite servicing work.
Right, because currently there's nothing on single family. You can you can basically knock a house down, build another one. There's nothing. So I was exactly confused where the 150 came in, because obviously these ones are more than 150.
Yes.
To Councillor O'Neill's point about, it does add, I suppose, somewhat to the cost of housing. But if housing is driven by the market and you have other areas in the city where there's greenfield, where these developers have to put in these services, you've actually have an unlevel playing field, because you have greenfield area where they're building a brand new house and they put the services in, but you go into an older part of Coquitlam, knock down a house, put up two, and or just rebuild, for example, and then you don't have to do any street servicing. And what is the trigger point right now? There is none. If you knock down a house and build two, that's where it kicks in.
That's where it would kick in. That would then be part of a subdivision, and that's where that's where we're seeing some of the inequities.
And I agree, because we've had this discussion before, that's a disincentive to build the smaller homes. So you get the big monster house, you can knock down your house, build a huge house, and you still leave the gravel walkway and everything in the front. You don't do the road improvement, or the road frontage. So this would correct that as well. But I note here in the report, if we go with recommendation 3, this would not be citywide, and yet we have demolition and reconstruction of homes all through the city. And I mean, I'm thinking the ones in Mayardville where we have housing choices, but we have other areas where we don't have the servicing in place. And so I'm just wondering, considering that they're not the big development areas, is this still not an opportunity to begin putting some money towards giving those residents the sidewalks and curbs that they deserve as well?
And that may be a point of clarification as well too, is that, well, in our higher density housing choices type neighborhoods, the expectation would be full works and services for the frontage. In some of our more established neighborhoods that are not the current zoning or OCP is not dictating any significant land use changes in those neighborhoods, there still would be an evaluation of those based on those prevailing standards, those prevailing conditions, and if a sidewalk was missing a piece, it might be an option to look at having that developer build that. So there still would be a review. It's just there would be more of a discretionary review of the single family in the older established neighborhoods.
The only other thing that I would add is we wanted to approach this in a phased manner, there's a lot of issues to consider and to deal with, and we wanted to tackle the areas that were under the highest rate of redevelopment first, and then see how that goes, and then we could always expand it later to all the areas. But initially, we wanted to make sure we got it right and to focus it on the highest redevelopment areas first.
And I think that I'm glad to see this coming forward. I think the cash-in-lieu makes sense, because there may be areas where only one house develops, but I also think that you have to look at both ways. You have to also look at latecomers, because if you get 90% of the homes on a street, or whatever our trigger point might be, 75, then do we just go in and do the work and then say to these other 25%, when your house is either demolished, redone, or whatever, then we complete that. So I think that the two work well together, a latecomers as well as a cash-in-lieu. I'm not sure that I would support a time limit on the cash-in-lieu. I know where Councillor Asmussen is coming from that. I would just be concerned that somebody might see this as a chance to roll the dice and maybe not have to do the improvements. Like, maybe I'm the first one, nobody else on the street does it, and if I wait this out for 7 years, I'm not going to have to pay anything. And I think that would be the concern, that if we put a limit on it, it's almost like, well, geez, I'll try for the cash-in-lieu because I might get off, as opposed to I have to make the improvements today. And I think that's the danger in a limit on the cash-in-lieu program.
Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. A lot of great stuff here, Jason, so thank you very much for putting this together. A couple of quick questions. With regards to the first piece, in typical costs for frontage, so if we took a look at a standard 66-foot lot, and we looked and said, okay, well, what would the typical frontage costs be on that we'd be anticipating with sidewalk, lighting?
Typical costs that we would be seeing currently with a two-lot subdivision are in the probably the $30,000 to $50,000 range, in that kind of range. It obviously varies if there's grading, earthworks, the extent of maybe sewer connections and things of that nature. But that's the general range we're seeing.
Okay, so right now, if somebody is taking down an old house and building one big house, they don't have to pay that.
They don't have. That's correct.
But if they subdivide it, which is really the behavior we'd like to see to kind of encourage more housing variety, smaller homes, avoid that monster home, they're saving $30,000 to $50,000 by just building one. So this is a way of saying, you're not going to save it, so why don't you do what probably makes more sense for the neighborhood and the city and build 2 smaller homes, correct?
That's correct.
So it's a carrot, not a stick.
That's correct.
All right, thank you very much. Impacts on processing times. We talk about the turnaround times for permits, and time is money in the industry, and to the residents that are doing their own work or having their own work done. Time is money. Do we anticipate this having a significant impact on permit processing times?
A key issue to evaluate and make sure that obviously that's addressed. Actually, our hope and expectation would be that having a cash-in-lieu option would actually be an option or an alternative as agreed upon by both parties to help expedite the process. So then we would be looking at maybe having some fixed per meter type fee rates that could be applied to a frontage. So those are all things we need to evaluate, but I do think that in order to have a successful program, especially at the single family level, some alternative needs to be in place to give the applicant the option.
Thank you. And in terms of new or significant renovations, I absolutely agree we have to have a number there. Again, we're trying to encourage a certain behavior. And again, that's perhaps a smaller footprint, a house that's more in line with what typically a family needs to grow up in or would like to have grow up in. You don't need 6,000 square feet. Perhaps 2,500 might be more than plenty. So I think that I'd hate to see all of a sudden, instead of a demolition and a rebuild or a subdivision, we just see it being taken back down to the studs and requests for 2,000 square foot additions, and just to avoid it. So I think a dollar value on that is absolutely the way to go. I would strongly encourage us to pursue that. So chat on that, and I think the city manager touched on the last point for me. I was trying to see what the difference was between option 1 and going across the city versus option 3 that you're presenting to us here. So it just gives the opportunity for us to take a look and say, you know what, that neighborhood's got a lot going on. Kugler, for example, has got a lot of stuff going on. So let's take a look at that. We want the frontage done. Whereas another street, maybe it's not as critical. Is that truly the difference? That decision-making process is back in staff's hands?
Yeah, that's exactly. In the areas we currently know are provided options for different development types. Some of the photos you've seen, those are the initial step where we're concentrating on. We were looking at applying some discretion, but if a neighborhood goes through either a neighborhood planning process or some sort of an OCP change, and this could expand. If we did see a neighborhood with a significant amount of redevelopment and regrowth, and that streetscape we knew was going to be subject to new development occurring along it, that would be an area we would also look at, moving forward with. But the initial step is to definitely concentrate in these high growth areas.
There are some areas of the city where we're really encouraging housing choices, and some areas that are not eligible for that. We would start in those areas where is that mix, and we're trying to encourage housing choices, and by de facto encourage folks to consider housing choices rather than build a very large home on the existing footprint. Those are the areas we would start with. And there is different kinds of neighborhoods that fall into different categories. So we're going to use that kind of methodology to start the review. We want to get it right and get it rolling for a couple of years and demonstrate that we are going to revolve this money. We're not going to sit it in a reserve. We're going to try to get out there with these works as soon as possible. And so we don't want the money sitting in a reserve. We want to put it into works for this community as soon as possible. But in order to do that, we have to really target the areas where we would first put it in.
All right, I appreciate that, because I think when we look to some of our long-term residents and perhaps have been waiting for streetscape improvements or upgrades, they'd be very happy to see that money start to be spent and start to see the services put in place. So really like the work you've done on this. I absolutely will support it going forward, and thank you.
Councilor Cirillo.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the executive summary there, just of covering why we need to do this in a modern city. So I very much appreciate that. Just a couple of comments, extension on what Councillor O'Neill said, and maybe opposite opinion on what Councillor Marsden said, but I do believe that we need more refining on renovation and addition, and I would rather that it wasn't dollar-based, because sometimes the finishings alone can increase, and I do think for housing affordability, I think that we should still be able to take an older home and renovate beautifully inside on the same footprint, and not necessarily fall into that. So I would want to see some more work done on that. And what do we consider an addition that wouldn't make frontage works kick in, and what would we consider the size of an addition that would? So that was the comments that I had before. I know on page 4 it talks about $150,000 value. I mean, that's almost peanuts. Hard to believe we're saying that, but that's almost peanuts today. $150,000. $75,000 for labor, $75,000 for hard materials. I mean, it's nothing. And then the only other comment I had, or actually it's a question about the Cash-in-Lieu, and I hope you don't get a lot of it. I hope people go ahead and do the frontages, because that's kind of the hope. But if we do get some, would the city contract out the work, or will the work become part of the city work plan that would go to engineering, or how would that work, or has there been any thought on that?
That is a separate process that we have not yet discussed exactly how to go about doing that work. Both systems are viable options, and we would have to do some work on exactly how we would turn our mind to doing that. And we have not got to that stage in the review yet.
So
if I could just for a second, there was an earlier comment that Councillor Zerillo made about whether finishing, the style of finishing, or the cost, the level of finishing would affect that threshold of if it were dollars. I wonder if we could get an explanation of how the dollar threshold is calculated, whether it's an estimate based on the style of dwelling, or is it an estimate based on the calculations on square footage?
We still have to do some more work on that. The intent is the trigger should not capture somebody who is simply updating their existing home and adding a minor renovation to it, a minor addition. But it should capture something that is using a renovation, for example, 90% of a new home and just using the existing foundation. And so there's a judgment that goes into that. We have to define that. And the trigger, I would expect, would be significantly higher than 150,000 and might have a couple of different triggers, all of which would have to be met. But it would certainly not be our intent that if somebody is simply redoing all the finishings in their home, that would trigger this kind of improvement. That is not the intent of this program.
Thank you for that explanation. I'm not sure that. Okay. Councillor Zerillo?
Yeah, so the other thing I'd be interested in knowing for the future is what percentage we do think is going to be Cash-in-Lieu, because I'm not getting my head around that so much right now about whether we should or shouldn't have a term for it. So yeah, I'd want to understand how much we think is going to get done. I mean, we can guesstimate it, I guess. So yeah, unfortunately, housing is out of control, and that 150 threshold, I wish it was a lot of money in regards to a house, but I guess it isn't anymore. Thank you so much.
Okay, I thank you very much for bringing this report, Jason. This has been a pet peeve of mine for a long time, as council knows. The almost disincentive that we put in place when we develop a program like Housing Choices and try to create more affordable housing alternatives to a great big house on the lot, and yet we inadvertently incent that which we do not want, and disincent that which we do want. And so this is one way of addressing some of those the unintended consequences of the way in which we require service improvements for zoning changes, but not for a brand new house. So I'm very supportive of that element of it. And I want us to be flexible. I want us to find the cash-in-lieu where it makes a lot of sense, not just where it's convenient for the builder, but where it's also appropriate for us. It reminds me as well, though, that we have, and it's mildly unrelated, I'm just going to raise it right now, the number of times where a builder has gone in and built the big house, often with a big stone fence, wall, wrought iron on the front property line, and then paved right up to it on the city boulevard. This is one way of making certain that stops. This will stop that on new houses, but we're still left with a large number of homes. And because of our streetscapes are now changing, and we're ending up with, in many cases, 60, 70, 80 feet of asphalt, property line to property line, I'd like to see us approach the paving companies that do most of the work, and let them know that we'll hold them accountable for paving on a city boulevard without permit. Right now, I don't know how aggressive we are with that, because it's clear that lots of property owners perhaps don't understand the rules, or perhaps realize that we're not enforcing the rules because they see their neighbors have had it done and we don't go back and make them rip out the asphalt. We really need to transform those neighborhoods to make them safer, and 80 feet of asphalt or 70 feet of asphalt width isn't a safer road. It's a very dangerous road that will end up with injuries or death of children crossing between parked cars that are parked perpendicular. So it's strongly related to this, but not covered by the report or by the report's recommendations. That said, I also look, I'm almost leaning the way Councillor O'Neill hinted at, which is I don't want to penalize the renovator. I'm leaning toward encouraging or trying to make sure we remove any barriers to the healthy renovation of existing dwellings. We see too many really nice houses getting torn down because the land is worth 10 times what the house is worth. So I do want to see us, I've gone in and given thank you cards to people in my neighborhood who've done a good job renovating their home and really given it another 20 or 30 years of life. It's much more environmentally sound. It's a more sustainable approach than just simply ripping down every 40 years all of our housing and starting from scratch. I didn't have any questions. Councillor Reid does, though.
Well, Councillor Reid was going to talk about this a bit, and I didn't realize everyone was going to put in some ideas, so now you're going to be stuck with mine. Being someone who lived through the $6,000 that we collected for years and years and years, and that didn't work out too well, if I had to do it over again, I'd look at the timing of what areas I could do. I'd do something similar to what the assessment authority does, which is sort of divide my city into areas and look at the work plan that engineering has going. And that would sort of be the basis that I'd start on. I'd make sure that the work that I was doing anywhere in the city was fairly consistent for sidewalks and boulevard treatments. And then I'd assign a number to it, whether it was square footage or however you would do it, so that we would know what dollars we had to work with in what area. And as houses develop, of course, naturally sell and develop from the owner now to someone new, those funds would become due. If someone remodels, say over 30, 50%, whatever you deem appropriate, then they would become due, but not under that. So that would allow for something the mayor was speaking about. Most people who are going to remodel up to about 50% of the value of their home, they're going to want the front done anyhow, so I don't think that's going to become an issue. So the appropriate funds would become due upon sale, upon transfer, or upon redevelopment, and that wouldn't include estate sales and those transfers that are not market. I think the assessments would be based on today's costs and increased by year by specified interest or the cost of living or something, so that it gets fairness over the community and people could have their choices on how they would want to pay if they weren't disposing of their property in any given way. And I can think of a few of those, but I've probably babbled long enough. But I think what we need is we need a defined program of how we're going to do this. And then within that, some of the things that I've brought about would trigger dollars coming in, but being that we would start from a specific date with a number and then increase it, I think would give some level of fairness. Thank you.
Thank you. No further discussion? On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is proposed official community plan amendment bylaw number 4694 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4695 to redesignate and rezone a portion of the lands at 3001 Highland Drive to facilitate townhouse development and a neighborhood park. I'd just like to point out to council that there was a missing Schedule A to bylaw 4694, and this has been provided to you on table. And the staff recommendation is that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4694. First reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4695. That in accordance with the Local Government Act, consider bylaw number 4694 in conjunction with the City of Coquitlam 2016 5-year financial plan bylaw, which is 4609, and the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan. And finally, that bylaws number 4694 and 4695 be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Towner. Councillor Zerillo.
Else to go first, but I guess it's not going to happen. Okay, so I've got some questions. First one, so I'm just going to go ahead and questions for staff. First one, how much operating and liability costs are associated with the city taking ownership of what I believe was 17.4 acres of land, including the Hyde Creek and the fish rearing pond? Or so that would be a question that I would want to have answered for the public hearing if it happens. I had a question about programming, if this is going to be a programmed park, city programmed park, and if so, do we have an estimate on operating on that? And while I'm talking about that, I might throw in that I would be interested in specific options for girls in the parks. I noticed that there's a sports court, but there's lots of research that says that girls don't get equal access to sport courts. I wanted to understand, is there anywhere else in the city where a townhouse development of this size has one access point in and out for cars? If this goes to first reading, I'd be interested. And then I'm interested to hear from our own engineering department, because I'm noting that the majority of the community is 3 out of 4, I think, was 3/4. I've got so much stuff underlined here, but 3/4 of the community wasn't particularly keen on the townhousing, and perhaps the location. So I wanted to understand from the city engineering if we have a preference for park location versus the residential component, north and south. And then I'm probably going to have some questions about the temporary strata-operated sanitary sewer pump, but we'll start with whether there's any, and I guess, I'm sorry, Parks and Rec too might have some comment on that. Preference for location of park versus residential.
I would suggest staff provide some very initial comments now in a very generic way, and normal practice is that at the public hearing that more information is provided. But if either engineering or parks or planning have any initial comments on your questions, now would be an appropriate time.
Ms. Hunt.
Through the chair, I'd just like to address the operating tied to capital, which was your first question. The park planning for this park will go through our regular park planning process where council will be brought, conceptual plans, detailed design, and we've recently implemented a process where we bring forward at that final detailed design and budget the operating tied to capital, and it'd be at that time as we proceed through the park planning process that you'd be provided with those answers. With respect to the location of the park, there are pros and cons to the park being in the north or the south. The Parks, Recreation and Culture does support the current location. However, we have also worked up some conceptual plans of it being in the south. The programming can be accommodated in either location. So I'll leave it at that.
Good. So yeah, I guess, maybe this can be addressed if this goes to first reading. But yeah, I'm not an engineer, but I sure would like to understand more about a temporary strata-operated sanitary sewer pump, because I got to think a lot of people probably don't know how to install or operate one of those things.
Through your worship, this is relatively simple in the engineering world. The temporarily strata-operated sanitary pump station is a pump station where the maintenance and operating costs are borne by the strata. It works. Generally, there are no issues with it. The primary reason why engineering would prefer, in fact, requires a temporary force main system, that we anticipate that some of the properties on the west side of Glenbrook over time may develop, and that might give us an opportunity to secure a statutory right-of-way that we can use for a ultimate gravity connection from the subject site. In other words, currently we do have a gravity system on Glenbrook, but it's very, very difficult to access it. In fact, not practical to access it with a gravity system.
Because of the south location, or just even if it was in the north, even if the residential was in the north, we still wouldn't be able to access it?
From the north, we would be able to access it very likely, because Collins Road could be one of the conduits, and we would have essentially a direct access to the lower parts of Glenbrook.
Okay, so I'm just going to have one more question, which might be two. Is there anywhere in Coquitlam right now where there is a temporary strata-operated sanitary sewer pump running? Have we had one? Do we have one now? Have we had one historically?
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if we have a strata development where there is a temporary sanitary pump station, but we have several residential developments where there are privately operated sanitary pumps of various sizes.
Sure, but it's a single family?
Typically, yes.
Okay, so then it is two questions. Is there any liability to the city as far as contamination with a temporary strata-operated sanitary sewer pump?
I don't believe the risk is there, although it could be. The sanitary system is hooked up to the public sanitary system, and as long as everything is well maintained and operated, there shouldn't be a problem. Now, should there be a problem either because of a failure of the pump or a blockage of the pipe system, and there is an overflow, and the overflow occurs in an environmentally sensitive area, then yes, there is a big problem. But that would be, not that it's a mitigating factor at all, but that would be the problem of the strata that's responsible for the pump station. I do believe that with current technology, most, if not all, of these situations can relatively easily prevented, in part because of the operation of the system, well-maintained system, also the sizing of the holding tank, And also there are a variety of alarm systems available if there is a pump failure and the holding tank level is rising, signals can be sent out easily, and there is usually enough time to send in a pumper truck and deal with the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Diozegi.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, so I will blame Councillor O'Neill. All opposed. Councillor Zerillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 8, which is a contender for long report title of the year, pertains to official community plan amendment bylaw number 4677 for 3553 to 3575 Victoria Drive and 3570 Baycrest Avenue to adjust the land use designation boundaries to reflect site topography.
Can we call a recess, come back later and finish this?
I'll still be talking, the recess is not required. And zoning amendment bylaw number 4678 to facilitate creation of 9 RS8 large village single-family lots and 1 RT2 townhouse residential lot at 3567 and 3575 Victoria Drive and 3570 Baycrest Avenue. Staff recommendation is that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam citywide official community plan amendment bylaw number 4677. First reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4678. That in accordance with the Local Government Act, that Council consider bylaw 4677 in conjunction with the City of Coquitlam 2016 5-year financial plan bylaw number 4609 and the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan. And finally, that bylaws numbers 4677 and 4678 be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Marsden. No? Okay. Oh, okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We're going to public hearing on that.
Item 9 is consideration of fourth and final reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 4683 and development permit authorization at 717, 719, and 721 Breslay Street for a 6-story apartment building. Staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4683 pertaining to 717, 719, and 721 Breslay Street, and that Council approve the signing and sealing of the DP and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is major amendment to a development permit to discharge an existing covenant restricting the sale of ground floor commercial retail units at 3007 Glen Drive. Staff recommendations that Council approve the signing and sealing of the development permit amendment for 3007 Glen Drive and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Zerillo. Councillor Reid.
I really like this. And when we went about putting the rules and regulations and bylaws into play for the town center, we're just taking this one out right now, correct? We're just doing this development permit amendment. But have we considered looking at the rest of our town center core? Because for businesses now, things have changed in the last 5 years or so. For businesses now to own their own retail spot instead of renting is becoming something that's much more preferred, and it's been a market change. And I think, I certainly approve of this one, but I think we should talk about it more about some of the other spaces we have coming up, and some of the spaces, especially in Coquitlam around the SkyTrain stations. And if they don't sell, the building owner still owns them, so he can rent them out or lease them or what he does. So we really don't have much to lose. But I think we have a lot to gain by having a lot of retail business owners. So I really like this. Thank you.
Your Worship, I think that's a very interesting comment, and I think something I'll make note of when we do eventually get to the city center area plan update is to factor that in. Because as Councillor Reid has said, there has been a bit of a sea change in approach around these commercial rental units or retail units, CRUs, and not just in Coquitlam but across the Lower Mainland, in that where the developers hang on to that space and try to lease it out, the market's thin. Where they strata and sell the units, there seems to be a lot greater interest. So that's what's really motivating what's behind this with this application.
Thank you.
I'm supportive of strata, the sale of these units. I have some real challenge though with one element of it. And I recognize that part of the incentive, of course, for the developer's point of view is they don't want to be in the commercial retail leasing space business. But I'm looking at the top of page 2. Underneath the bullets, the paragraph describes, of course, one of the things we've been challenged with in our city center is that a whole lot of the leasing tenants are hair salons and dentist offices. So we're going to solve that because we're going to allow these to be sold, and they'll be sold to a hair and beauty salon and a dental clinic. And I'm struggling with how many is enough hair salons and dental clinics. We have, I think, the highest density of, I mean, if you want your teeth done, Glen and the High, any day, go there, no appointment necessary. And we've commented that there are lots and lots of hair salons as well, and I know that they're relatively easy to set up. They're low cost TIs, and but it's a struggle.
Your Worship, it is perplexing. That's for sure, and in fact, that's why this covenant was first put in place, because when we got to that phase of the
We're taking it out now that we have a good hair salon ready to buy in. And I'm sure they are. I'm not making fun of them, but
again, it's very challenging. Ideally, we'd like to have, we'd like to see a streetscape, particularly along, like Glen and the High, and that sort of our, I think is emerging as the downtown of Coquitlam Center. Have that active, vibrant variety of retail and services. At this point in the economic cycle, or the life cycle of those buildings and that location, excuse me, we're being told there's just not the market interest. I think about that as, does that mean if you want to go shopping, you go over to the mall, you want to get your hair done, you walk up and down the High or Glen? It's very perplexing. They've come forward, they've asked for council's consideration of releasing this restrictive covenant so they can move ahead with these sales. I guess all I can really offer, because I have no better response to your question, because I'm struggling with myself, is that I think this is something I'd like to take away and put on the to-do list with the city center area plan. We need sort of an urban land economic analysis of what is necessary to support a wider range of businesses, and why isn't that happening now in these locations.
I look forward to that analysis, because ultimately that's what we're going to need. We need to examine, do we not, I recognize from the point of view of the developer, highest and best use is a sold piece of real estate. That's, from our perspective though, the best use is one that creates a vibrant and exciting streetscape and really contributes to the character of the neighborhood. And I worry that you say this might be the current phase of this neighborhood, which implies that as the neighborhood evolves, these businesses will go broke because there's just too many of them, and they will evolve. But I'm contemplating whether it's possible to require at the development permit stage, for example, that some of the units be built, be prepped for capacity for kitchen and exhaust and those sorts of things, the capacity for other retail uses. And I don't want to design that now, but I certainly want us to analyze how we can foster a really truly wonderful streetscape along Glen and along the High and our other downtown streets. We've done a tremendous lot of work, and our residents love it. I think at this point we're fine-tuning, but this is certainly one of the fine-tuning elements that I perceive, because we're going to look really good. At least our teeth and our hair will look really good. I'd like our streetscape to be great too. So, Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. When I looked at this, I saw that I highlighted the exact same paragraph the mayor just spoke to. So I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Reid in recognizing the market's shifting, and these can be viable for sale. I think that's great. I don't want to get into controlling how many hair salons, how many nail salons, how many dentists are in a specific corridor. The market does that. Yet at the same time, the question I have here is the company has 5 locally based businesses. So is this 5 that are locally on this strip already that are renting spaces, and now they're buying here, and we've got vacancy in the others? Do we have any indication, like do we know who the proponents are that are taking these on? Has there been discussion about that?
Through the chair, unless Chris or George have any other insights. I was speaking with a representative of BOZA late today. I think they're a little apologetic. They didn't have a staff person that could attend tonight because we were sort of suspecting there may be some questions, but they couldn't make it. The way it was described to me that these are Coquitlam residents and business people that are looking to invest. They see an opportunity in that location, vis-a-vis our city center, the Evergreen Line, this building, and they want to take an ownership stake in those units and operate those businesses.
So this covenant that was put in place initially was to provide some sort of certainty to the city with regards to what happens to those sites longer term, in terms of they weren't just going to float out to whomever to buy them, and we see an endless cycle of small shops that just didn't quite make it. Was that what the purpose of the covenant in the first place?
Through the chair again, no, I think it was more a concern at the time of the retail and service business mix that was emerging along the high street in Glen. And thinking had been, well, if the developer hangs on to the space, they then may be willing to, well, maybe be more selective about who they would place as a tenant, because they're trying to get an exciting mix that'll help in selling their units above, which was the Newport Village model, a different market, different time. And so we had requested, the developer went along with it, to place the tenant, or place the covenant on the title, holding them to owning the units for a period of time.
Okay. And so that was done at the outset, and now we're at a point where we're obviously recommending the release of the covenant and say we're satisfied with the mix along the corridor, we're comfortable. The concerns that the city had at the time back in 2010 have been assuaged, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Your Worship.
I'm sorry, so the concerns that were in place when the covenant was requested, so we've seen enough activity that we're comfortable. That's what I'm sensing here.
Again, ideally, we would like to see a greater range of businesses get established and flourish along Glen and the High. But also, though, we also too appreciate the market shifting, and this is sort of the reality of the time, and this is what they've come back with. It also should be noted that the covenant was a pretty soft restriction. It didn't restrict uses per se. It was more placing the obligation on the developer to hold the property and trusting that they would come up with an appropriate tenant mix through that 5-year period of time. All the uses that are proposed are consistent with the C4 zoning, and so on that basis, staff, with a little bit of hesitation, is recommending that it be quitclaimed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo.
I have no concerns about who goes in there as long as somebody does. I think there's always a running commentary that SD43 has the best dental benefits in the area, so maybe that's what's supporting all of these dentals. But I have no issue with that. My question is, Is this just the ground level CRUs, or can any commercial space on floors above level 1 also be sold? I didn't quite understand that. Like that.
And through the chair, the covenant only applied to the ground level CRUs.
Okay. I mean, you may be no answer to this, but has there been any interest in maybe purchase of office space up levels 2 or 3 where it applies?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I think there is a sign out there that does talk about leasing opportunities, but that's the extent of my knowledge on that.
Okay, so this one deals directly just with the ground floor CRUs?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
I just wanted to throw in a couple of things about what's happening. Tenant improvements and things like that are so expensive now, and we know that from all our own contracts that we're going into. The interest rates are low. It behooves someone to really look to buying instead of leasing. And we still have all our zoning in place. And when someone's investing in a business and they're looking at dental and hair, then they must think we have a lot of teeth and a lot of hair around here, or else they wouldn't be putting all their money out to open up such a business. But some of the businesses that Councillor Marsden has been talking about, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, but bringing in people in the high-tech areas and all the equipment and wiring and things, that's expensive. And if you're going to put that kind of an investment into a business, you're going to want to own the property. So I think there's more than one way to look at this, and I think we're doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. So the amendment to the development permit, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is also an amendment to a development permit, and this is to revise the design for a car wash and a mini warehouse facility at 1100 Woolridge Street. Staff recommendations that council approve the signing and sealing of the DP amendment for 1100 Woolridge Street, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I had one question. I couldn't figure out, I think it's mentioned a couple of times here that under this design change, the vacuum stations will be moved across the street. And I don't know where exactly across Woolridge it would be moved to. And I'm just curious about that. I didn't see that reflected on any of the attachments either. How would they would get there, and is it another piece of property they're going to have to?
Councillor O'Neill, if you look on page 2, the bottom, the 5th bullet, which is the longest bullet, it explains that it's intended to be moved across Woolridge. This is, I guess, this is 1100 Woolridge, and it's going to be moved to 1200 Woolridge, which is a separate development permit application that's in stream.
I didn't get that part of it. Separate development permit application. Okay. I missed that somewhere along the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
So I had the same observation and that Councillor O'Neill just brought up, and I just have some concern that based on the timing, if we approve this DP amendment, then we pretty much are expected to approve the one that's coming. 1200 Woolridge. Am I interpreting that right?
No, that is not correct. There is no obligation for council to also approve the subsequent development permit. Should council grant the amendment tonight, that would deal with the proposed works on this site alone. Council could consider independently the future one with whether or not they're supportive of the form and character of that development.
Thank you.
Okay, so, but this one would no longer have vacuums, and I've never seen an extensive car wash that doesn't have vacuums anymore. So if we rejected the next one, then we'd probably see another development permit amendment application to come back and reinstate the vacuums on this site. I mean, I'm not sure why we're not trying to do them both at the same time, or somewhat in concert, or if that's possible.
Well, they're two separate properties separated by a road. They should have a separate development permit for each of them. And this one is dealing with the amendment specifically on site to increase the width of the car wash and to reconfigure their laning a bit and increase the height. A future one would deal with the adjacent site.
Yeah, I mean, the timing sucks. Yeah. Yeah, up till now, May has not gotten into the puns that much, but I'm still. So why would it not be possible to have done them both on the? I mean, they won't be able to proceed with their development until they know that they can have vacuums in the site across the street, and I'm not certain that a high-profile site, although a small one like that, I'm not certain in my mind whether that's the highest and best use is a parking lot with vacuums on it. So here we are deciding whether or not I have to pretty much decide tonight whether I like vacuums across the street. I mean, my decision really hinges on that, I suspect, because I don't want to see a third. I'm the one that was opposed to the development permit, the only one that voted against this development permit in the first place, because I didn't think that was the highest and best use for this site. And now we're expanding to be on both sides of the street with a parking lot and a service building, I gather, that, and probably some signage since it's right against the freeway. Anybody? There we go.
In terms of the decision by the owner, the applicant, to take his chances on a DP across the street, it was a business decision they made that the layout is proposed with the current car wash. It's going to be more profitable by relocating the vacuums across the street. And as Chris pointed out, however, it's, council will make that decision when we bring forward that development permit application. I don't know whether, is the applicant here, perhaps he or she can respond to that question?
It's Council. Mr. Clerk.
Okay. So, Mr. Jarvie has
there's
information to show related to plan.
There you go.
And just if other speakers to be called up, it would require a resolution of council.
Yep. So I was going to ask, at the very least, I'd like to have seen the proposed layout of the site, recognizing that the site across the street is encumbered somewhat by a watercourse and the SPIA associated with a watercourse. Okay, so the dark shading is the service building, and I count, is it 7? No, it's more than that. More than that. That's enough vacuum stations to change weather patterns, isn't it? We'll have a strong southerly wind. Anybody? No? Okay, I saw a hand up there. Is there a resolution to invite a speaker? Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Zerillo is opposed. The speaker can come forward if he wishes. Nope, wait. Oh, it has, sorry, this is one of those.
It requires unanimous.
No, this is unanimous, not 2/3. Okay. So we can't get the answer to that question. Okay. Then I'll vote against. Okay. I hear someone else that might want to speak. Is there any objection to having someone else speak? Seeing none. Thank you. Sir, would anyone like to come up and speak? There we go.
We shall record the original vote as unanimous.
Thank you.
Hi, Councillor.
Councillors, Your Honor. Yeah, the whole reason for the change is basically insurance. We haven't changed the footprint of the car wash building. We've reconfigured the equipment inside so it'll process cars quicker. And to do that, we've had to move the vacuums to the other side of the street. Really, we didn't see a big cost to that because with all the setbacks and the SPIA requirements, that land's actually not that valuable. So it was actually good use for it. And it's certainly more expensive to us. We're not really sure if there's going to be a big financial gain for us, but it's the whole car wash is going to run a lot smoother than what's currently planned. Does that answer your question?
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Do you have an application in now for the other spot?
Yes, we do.
And how far down the pike is that? Perhaps staff could answer.
Mr. Fuji? No. Mr. Jarvie? No. Mr. McIntyre? Oh, he's pointing at Mr. Jarvie.
Thank you. Through your chair, the application was received on April 1st, 2016. It's in process, and when it's ready for forwarding to council, will be brought forward probably early in the fall.
So we're looking at 5 months? April to May, June, July, August, September?
Yes, that is correct.
Ooh, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill. Oh.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so since the applicant is up here, now that I know where this is going, it struck me as a little unusual, just because I couldn't understand the traffic flow that you have for the car wash runs counterclockwise, starting on the west side, going up and around, and then starting the west, traveling east, doing a U-turn, then traveling west through the car wash, and then exiting sort of at the west end of the property. And then, however, the vacuum system is way on the other side again, way back, further east. Do you think, is it the vacuuming first or second, or how are they?
Everybody's got their own program. Some people don't. 9 out of 10 people don't use vacuums at all.
Yeah, okay.
So some people, it depends on the traffic at any given time. If it's busy, if there's a lineup, sometimes people go use the vacuums first.
I see.
And vice versa.
Some people just use the vacuums and that's all, and that'll be...
I suppose.
Okay. So it's almost like it doesn't have to be continuous. It's not one continuous operation. Okay, fine. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Well, I'm just trying to sort of get a handle where they were before. So I'm looking at attachment 3. And was that the vacuum sort of just all in a row? There's a sort of an area that's shaded in a light sort of pink rose color on attachment 3. That was the approved DP site plan.
Prior to the widening. That's Baycrest. It's a vacuum of its own, yes.
Don't go to 2 or I have to leave again.
Go, one more. There we go. 11. So we're talking attachment 3. There we go.
That's it. This is actually easier to read than what I have in front of me here. So that area that was sort of directly above the car wash, that's where they were before then. Is that
That's right.
And so because of flow, they've now been removed from there and moved, or was it because you had to create parking there, or what?
It's really because it's a bunch of things coming together. It's efficiency, and a large part of it is when we started having a really good look at Lot B, which was secondary to our purchase of, we were focusing on Lot A for the mini storage and the car wash. And when we really started looking at Lot B, we didn't find a lot of interest from retail users with all these setbacks. I mean, it's really quite a awkward site. And we looked at our highest and best use for the site, and the market was telling us it wasn't as good as what we thought it might be, but what the realtors told us it would be when we actually bought the site way back when. So we looked at it and thought, well, maybe we can relieve congestion and put the vacuums on the other side and actually get more volume during the busy times.
Right. So what is going to go where the vacuums were going to go? Is it just open road? Is there parking, or what's going to go up in this area?
This is expanded. That's expanded.
So does the actual car wash itself expands upwards? If I look at attachment 5, it's sort of got that. Well, no, the other.
Attachment 6 shows the wider car wash building, and it's eliminated those pink spaces.
Right, and move them across the street so that you can use the Lot B, whereas right now it's basically a piece of land that you can't figure out.
That's right.
What you could do with it, so you put the bays over there. Originally, with them tucked in behind the car wash, they're not visible from the street. So what's the screening or the design? We don't see any of that in here, do we?
There should be. They're beautiful stainless arches with. They're not the typical ones you see in your Chevron station or something like that.
Well, I'm just thinking. I have this vision of just a big cement building with opening your cubicles in it. Is that sort of what this is going to look like?
Do you have any?
Have something here. No, but I'm not going to.
This is the 3D rendering of the car wash, post-car wash. This is what you're saying.
I'm going to have to actually get you to be close to the microphone because this is being broadcast to thousands of residents at home.
So off the highway, this is the elevation that you are looking at. And the storage building is at the background, and you are seeing the entry to the car wash, the exiting from the car wash, and the entry to the car wash at each end. It's a designer car wash. Highly motivated by design, highly motivated by transparency and being able to see the car wash activity. And this is the lot across, and there is signage, and the vacuums are behind it.
Sorry, that's the signage?
This is the utility building for the vacuum, for the lot B.
Okay.
Which has all the vacuum stations. So there is a structure, it's a utility building that houses the equipment for the vacuums, and behind it there is the vacuum stations. Unfortunately, I don't have an image of the vacuums, but it's illustrated in one of your site plans. They're very beautifully designed curved arms that is used to vacuum your car. It's stainless steel.
There was one. There was one on the screen that showed. Yeah.
So to staff, we're being asked to approve a change for Lot A, to remove, I guess, to reconfigure the lot, and the vacuums are being removed. Does that mean they automatically move across the street, or that means that they come with a second development permit, which is what Councillor Reid was asking about?
Through the chair to Councillor Hodge, they'll come back as a second development permit application.
Right. So it could get approved here to remove the vacuums, but not necessarily approved to put them across the street.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. So we're taking a bit of a chance here. Yep. Okay, I got it now. Thank you.
If I can add something, I don't think there is a requirement to actually have vacuums at car wash, and there are car washes around Vancouver that don't have them below main. So it's our plan to put them in, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you hold up the plan for the utility building on the, is it the tallest building on the site? The one with the sign on it. So it's,
You're talking about this building?
yes.
It's not as high as the storage building.
Oh.
It's the perspective.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. And no other questions for them? Thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions on this item? Seeing none, the question is the development permit amendment for 1100 Woolridge. Only. All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries. I wish you great success, and okay, Mr. Clerk.
Item 12 is proposed road cancellation application adjacent to 742 Gauthier Avenue. This is bylaw number 4688. Staff recommendations that council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation bylaw number 4688, and that bylaw number 4688 be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the community charter.
Second. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden. We'll go with Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I have a question. If this gets approved, this highway dedication cancellation, then the lower end of Bernacchi will be reclassified as a lane. And so I'm just curious, looking at the attachment 2, lot number 16, that would mean that that property only has frontage to a lane, correct? And if yes, are there any legal ramifications to that, to taking away access to a road? It is? Is the frontage on Lougheed?
Yeah, the frontage on Louis isn't access, though. It's a retaining wall.
And it was going to be called
Okay, why don't we get a staff answer?
Through you, Chair. Yes, that is correct. Lougheed Highway would consider it as the parcel frontage, though access would be restricted to the lane.
Well, the Lougheed Highway at that point is, I think,
No
3
access.
meters below Bernacchi. I mean, it's a retaining wall, isn't it? It's not like there is access.
I didn't do a drive-by.
That's correct. There is no access to Lougheed.
So, can I answer your question?
I was just curious. Their address is Lougheed. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, don't try parking in front of our home. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Any other questions? Question is a highway cancellation. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 13 is also a proposed road cancellation. This is an application adjacent to 3419 Victoria Drive, and it's bylaw number 4658. Staff recommendations that council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation bylaw 4658, and the bylaw number 4658 be advertised in accordance with the requirements of the community charter.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item of business on this agenda.
Before we adjourn, I want to wish our community a very successful summer. Please enjoy all of the things that Coquitlam has to offer. Enjoy them responsibly. Take in some of our local community events, a block party in your neighborhood if they're having one, and we wish you great happiness until September. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor Towner to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll have a public question period.